The beep was the soundtrack to my life. Not a harsh, alarming beep, but a soft, rhythmic one. A gentle, digital chirp that echoed from the corner of my home office every 5 seconds. Beep. My son is breathing. Beep. His blood is carrying enough oxygen. Beep. We have time. For the past 3 months, that beep was my metronome. The steady beat against the chaotic symphony of new fatherhood. It was the sound of survival. And right now, it was starting to sound like a time bomb. I glanced away from my triple monitor setup, usually dedicated to tracking transoceanic cargo drones for my logistics company, and focused on the 2 screens that truly mattered. On the left, the baby monitor app showed my son, Leo, a tiny, fragile creature swaddled in a sea of white blankets. His tiny chest rose and fell in a rhythm I had memorized. On the right, the pulse oximeter app. A glowing red number pulsed in time with the beep, 92%. Stable. Acceptable. But not for long. My eyes darted to the physical oxygen tank in the corner of the room. A large green cylinder that was our direct line to the NICU we had so recently escaped. A small LCD screen on its regulator, usually a placid green, was now flashing a stark, angry red. 10% remaining. My own chest tightened. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the greasy evidence of a sleepless night. I sent a quick text to my wife, Sarah, who was upstairs attempting to reclaim a sliver of her sanity through sleep. Me. Tank's at 10%. Med Supply said Dave the driver is 10 minutes out. Her reply was instantaneous. She was never really sleeping, just resting in a state of high alert. Sarah. Thank God. I can hear that beeping in my sleep. Let me know when he's here. I promised I would, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. 10%. Under normal use, that was about 2 hours of oxygen. But if Leo's breathing became labored, if he had a bad moment, we could burn through that in 30 minutes. 10 minutes for the delivery was fine. 15 was pushing it. Anything more was a problem. I leaned back in my chair, the expensive ergonomic mesh groaning in protest. I stared out the window at Creekside Meadows, our slice of the American dream, or, more accurately, the American dream, as curated by a homeowners association with the creative vision of a beige paint swatch. The lawns were a uniform, chemically enhanced green. The mailboxes were all the exact same model, painted in the HOA-approved shade of tofu white. The houses, while architecturally distinct, all shared a certain sterile perfection, like they'd been 3D printed and placed on the lot by a team of obsessive-compulsive giants. This suburban paradise was governed by the iron fist of the HOA Star Chamber, and its Grand Inquisitor was a woman named Carol Peterson. Carol was the kind of person who finds genuine, soul-affirming joy in the rustle of a violation notice. Last week I'd received one, complete with a time-stamped photo, because my recycling bin had remained at the curb for an excess of 45 minutes post-collection. The week before, it was for a subtle, unauthorized garden gnome Sarah's mother had gifted us. The gnome, whom we had named Bartholomew, was cited for violating the lawn ornamentation bylaw. He was now serving a life sentence in our garage. My phone buzzed, dragging me from my bitter reverie. It was an unknown number. I answered, my heart rate kicking up a notch. Hello? Hey, Mr. Reed. This is Dave from Med Supply. The voice was young, hesitant. I'm at the gate of your community, Creekside Meadows? That's the one, I said, relief washing over me. Come on through, I'm the 3rd house on the left, number 114. There was a pause. A long, awkward one. I could hear the wind whistling through the phone. Yeah, about that, Dave said slowly. There's a woman here. She's standing in front of my van. My blood ran cold. I didn't even need to ask. Let me guess, I said, my voice dangerously low. Blonde hair, a visor that could double as a satellite dish, and the smug expression of someone who asks to speak to the manager at a self-checkout. "Whoa, yeah, that's her," Dave sounded impressed. "She says I'm an unauthorized commercial vehicle?" "Tell her you're a medical delivery," I instructed, already pushing my chair back and standing up. "It's exempt from the commercial vehicle rules. Tell her it's for an infant." "I did, sir, I swear I did," she said, and I quote, "All commercial vehicles require a permit submitted 72 hours in advance." And then she started reading from a little binder she's holding. "It's laminated, sir. The pages are laminated." He sounded genuinely terrified. "She's taken a photo of my license plate and is demanding my company's insurance provider." Unbelievable. My eyes shot to the monitor. The number had just ticked down. 9%. The beep suddenly sounded louder, more insistent. "Stay right there, Dave. Don't go anywhere," I said, my voice tight. "I'm on my way." I grabbed my keys, not even bothering to change out of my sweatpants and worn-out SpaceX t-shirt. The quiet, manicured streets of Creekside Meadows were about to get a front-row seat to what happens when bureaucratic nonsense collides with a sleep-deprived, tech-savvy, and very protective father. The race had begun. I didn't run. I did that brisk, purposeful walk that fathers everywhere use when they're trying not to look panicked. The manicured lawns blurred past me. The identical tofu-white mailboxes stood like silent, judgmental sentinels. Up ahead, I could see it. The pristine white gates of Creekside Meadows, and parked right in front of them, the white Med Supply van. And there, positioned squarely in front of the van's grill like a lone protester at a tank parade, was Carol Peterson. She was a masterpiece of suburban tyranny. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe ponytail, tucked under a tennis visor that, despite the overcast sky, was angled down with purpose. She wore a pastel pink tracksuit that probably cost more than my first car. In one hand, she clutched her phone. In the other, the legendary laminated binder of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC and Rs, the holy text of the HOA. "Carol!" I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. She turned, her expression shifting from one of smug authority to one of condescending patience. It was a look she had perfected. "Alex?" she said, her voice cloyingly sweet. "I was just explaining our community's vehicle protocol to this young man. He seems to be a bit confused." "He's not confused," I said, stopping a few feet from her. The delivery driver, Dave, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, gave me a helpless look from his open window. "I am. What the hell are you doing? This is a medical delivery for my son." Carol sighed, a theatrical, long-suffering sound. "Alex, we've been over this. You know the rules. Bylaw 17, Section C, Paragraph 4. All commercial deliveries, excluding standard USPS, UPS, and FedEx carriers, must be registered with the Architectural Review Committee no less than 72 hours prior to arrival. This vehicle," she gestured to the van with a flick of her wrist, "is not on my list." My brain felt like it was short-circuiting. I could feel a vein pulsing in my temple. "It's oxygen, Carol, for a baby. It's not a new sectional from Pottery Barn. The hospital arranged it. It's an emergency medical supply. It doesn't run on a 72-hour schedule." "The bylaws make no distinction for emergency supplies," she recited, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her binder. "Rules are rules, Alex. They are what separate us from a chaotic, ungoverned society. They maintain our property values. If I make an exception for you, where does it end? Unpermitted furniture deliveries? Unscheduled landscaping crews? It's a slippery slope." "A slippery slope to what? People getting the things they need? The horror!" Dave leaned out his window. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I deliver to hospital-level patients in gated communities all over the state. This is a first. It's a medical necessity." Carol gave him a withering look. "Then perhaps those other communities should learn to value order and protocol as we do here at Creekside Meadows. Their property values probably reflect their lax attitude." This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. This woman was arguing about property values while my son's oxygen supply was dwindling. I pulled out my phone and swiped to a picture of Leo, his eyes barely open, a tiny tube taped to his nose. I held it out to her. "This is my son, Carol. This is who you're stopping from getting what he needs." She glanced at the photo for a fraction of a second, her face utterly unmoved. "A failure to plan on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine," she said, delivering the classic line of every petty tyrant in history. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a push notification from the oximeter app. Oxygen monitor at 8%. That was it. Something inside me snapped. The panic, the frustration, the sheer mind-numbing rage at the weaponized stupidity standing in front of me, it all coalesced into a single moment of terrifying clarity. The anger vanished, replaced by a cold, humming calm. The calm of an engineer who has just identified the problem and is now cycling through solutions. Problem: immovable object, Carol, is preventing payload, oxygen, from reaching destination, house, via designated transport vector, van. Constraint: time-sensitive, ground access denied. Solution: alternate transport vector required. Access not required. I looked at Carol, standing there in her pink tracksuit, the self-appointed queen of this two-bit kingdom. I looked at Dave's van, trapped outside the gates. Then I looked up, at the vast, gray, open sky hanging over the entire subdivision. An airspace she didn't control. A slow, terrifying smile spread across my face. She mistook it for surrender. I lowered my phone. "You know what, Carol? You're right," I said, my voice eerily pleasant. "The rules are the rules. The van can't come in. You've won this round." She puffed up, her smugness returning full force. "I'm glad you've finally seen reason, Alex." I turned to Dave, who was looking at me like I'd just grown a second head. "Stay right there, Dave. Don't move an inch. I'll handle the cargo from here." Without another word, I turned and started walking briskly back toward my house. I could feel Carol's confused, victorious gaze on my back. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd upheld the sacred bylaws. She had no idea she had just declared war on a man who owned a private air force. I burst through my front door with the force of a man on a mission. Sarah met me in the hallway, her face a mask of worry. She'd clearly been watching the drama unfold on the neighborhood's network of security cameras. "What happened? I saw you talking to Carol. Don't tell me she actually—" "She blocked him," I said, heading straight for my office. Quoting bylaws at him like he was trying to smuggle a nuclear warhead past the petunias. "The van is not getting on this property." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. "What? Are you serious? I'll go down there. I'm a nurse. I'll explain—" "No," I said, sitting down at my command center. I powered on the monitors, the familiar hum of the high-end PC filling the silence. "No, we're not playing her game anymore. We're not begging. We're not negotiating with terrorists who wield laminated binders. We're playing my game now." I looked her dead in the eye. "I need 3 minutes." My office wasn't just a place with a desk and a laptop. It was the nerve center of Ether Logistics. 3 4K monitors formed a panoramic view of maps, data streams, and live video feeds. To the side, a dedicated server rack hummed quietly. This was where I managed a fleet of heavy-duty, custom-built drones, delivering critical supplies to the most inaccessible places on Earth. My clients were mining operations in the Andes, remote scientific outposts in Antarctica, and offshore oil rigs in the North Sea. Today, my client was at 114 Willow Lane, and the cargo was priceless. I pulled up the Ether Logistics Fleet Management interface. A satellite map of the region appeared, showing our main depot and hangar, a nondescript warehouse in an industrial park just 15 miles away. I clicked the icon for a secure audio-video line to the shift foreman. A moment later, Mike's face appeared on screen. He was a good man, ex-Air Force, with a calm demeanor that had seen him through everything. "Mike," I said, my voice steady, "I have a Priority 0 Alpha order. I'm authorizing it now. Code, read Omega 1. Mike's eyebrows shot up. He pushed his glasses up his nose. Boss? A 0 Alpha? The last time we did that was for that team of seismologists trapped on the Snaefellsjökull Glacier. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Mike. Better than fine," I said, typing furiously. A new order form popped up. "I need a payload of 2 standard M24 oxygen cylinders. Gross weight is about 30 pounds. Destination is my home address. You have the coordinates on file. I need it airborne in the next 90 seconds. Mike stared at me through the screen, his brain clearly trying to process the request. Your house, sir? A residential drop?" "You heard me. The package is at the front gate. My guy Davat is in a med supply van. He'll hand it over to your team. And use the Goliath. I want stability and minimal noise profile on descent." The Goliath 8, yes sir. The confusion on Mike's face was replaced by brisk professionalism. He was a man who followed orders, especially when a 0 Alpha override was involved. "Airborne in 90. The feed switched to a camera inside the hangar. I watched as 2 members of the night crew, moving with practiced efficiency, ran to the hangar door. They returned a moment later with 2 green M24 tanks, handing them to the launch team, who expertly secured them into a padded, quick-release cargo cradle. Sarah had been watching over my shoulder, her expression shifting from raw panic to utter disbelief. As she saw the operation unfolding on the screen, a slow smile began to form on her face. "Alex Reed," she whispered, shaking her head, "you are completely and certifiably insane." I glanced back at her, a grin finally breaking through my stress. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all," she said, her voice filled with a kind of awed approval. "And I love you for it, just try not to get us arrested." On screen, the cargo cradle was being attached to the belly of the beast, the Goliath 8. It wasn't one of those flimsy camera drones you see on YouTube. This was an industrial-grade octocopter, the size of a large coffee table. Its carbon fiber frame was built for durability, and its 8 powerful, whisper-quiet, brushless motors could carry a 50-pound payload through a blizzard. It was my beautiful, ugly, brutally efficient baby. I switched my view to the drone's forward-facing camera. With a low hum that quickly escalated to a powerful, focused buzz, the Goliath lifted off the ground. The hangar floor fell away, and it banked sharply. The GPS coordinates from my front lawn locked in its guidance system. On another monitor, I tracked its progress. A red line streaking across the suburban map at 60 miles per hour. I grabbed my phone and called Dave the driver, who was still waiting patiently at the gate. "Dave," I said, "it's Alex Reed. Stay in your van and do me a favor." "Sir?" "Look up." A new sound began to permeate the unnaturally quiet atmosphere of Creekside Meadows. It wasn't a car or a lawnmower or a leaf blower. It was a low, powerful, directional hum, like a swarm of very large, very determined hornets that had a pressing delivery to make. Down at the front gate, Carol, still basking in the glow of her supposed victory, heard it. She looked around, her face pinched with annoyance at this new, unsanctioned disruption to her perfectly ordered world. She scanned the street, then the sky, a confused frown on her face. Other residents, drawn by the unusual noise, started appearing as silhouettes in their windows. Curtains twitched. A few front doors cracked open. Then they saw it. The Goliath 8 cleared the top of the oak trees that lined the subdivision's entrance, a dark, menacing shape against the gray canvas of the evening sky. It wasn't a toy. It looked serious. It looked official. It completely ignored the front gate, the security cameras, and Carol's gaping mouth, banking smoothly over the community's perfectly manicured central parquet. It made a beeline directly for my house. From my office window, I had the perfect view. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. This was my craft, my technology, my solution. It was beautiful. The drone slowed as it approached my property, its GPS and optical sensors locking onto the pre-designated coordinates of my front lawn. The hum of its motors dropped in pitch as it began a smooth, controlled descent. It hovered 5 feet above my pristine, HOA-approved fescue grass, its rotors creating a gentle whirlwind that made the blades of grass dance. For a single, perfect second, it hung there, a testament to engineering and righteous indignation. Then, with a quiet, electronic click, the cargo cradle on its belly opened. The padded container, holding 2 tanks of life-saving oxygen, dropped the last few feet and landed on my lawn with the most satisfying thump I have ever heard in my life. The mission complete, the Goliath ascended vertically, its hum increasing as it climbed back to its cruising altitude. It banked gracefully and sped off, its sound receding into the distance. The entire on-site portion of the operation had taken less than 30 seconds. Silence descended once more upon Creekside Meadows. A profound, stunned silence. I didn't wait. I bolted out the front door, ran onto the lawn, and unlatched the container. Inside, nestled in high-density foam, were 2 beautiful green M24 cylinders. I hefted the container and ran back inside, Sarah holding the door open for me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and glee. In the office, I worked with the practiced efficiency of a parent who has done this 100 times. I disconnected the nearly empty tank, the alarm finally falling silent. I grabbed one of the new tanks, tore off the plastic seal, and connected the regulator. With a hiss of compressed gas, the flow meter jumped to life. I checked the monitor. Leo's oxygen saturation, which had dipped to a terrifying 7%, was already climbing. 8% to 9%. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. We were safe. Leo was safe. I glanced out the window again. Down at the gate, Carol was still frozen in place. Her smug victory had evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed disbelief that was rapidly curdling into pure, incandescent rage. Her face was turning a shade of red that clashed horribly with her pink tracksuit. She was fumbling for her phone, her fingers trembling so violently she could barely operate the screen. I didn't need to be a mind reader to know who she was calling. Meanwhile, Dave the driver was leaning against the side of his van, his jaw on the ground. He stared from my house back to the sputtering form of Carol, then back to my house. Then he threw his head back and began to laugh. A deep, hearty, unrestrained laugh that echoed through the gates of Creekside Meadows. The Queen had been checkmated, and now she was calling for reinforcements. 10 minutes. That's how long the peace lasted. Not a fragile peace, but a triumphant, giddy peace, where Sarah and I kept looking at each other and bursting into laughter. But all good things must end, and our good thing ended with the sight of red and blue lights flashing against our living room walls. 2 police cruisers hadn't stopped at the gate to get a statement from a frantic Carol. They had bypassed her entirely, driving directly to the scene of the alleged crime and parking at the curb in front of my house. I took a deep breath, straightened my rumpled t-shirt, and composed myself. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by the same cold, analytical calm that had helped me devise the plan. It was time for Phase 2, plausible deniability and overwhelming competence. 2 officers got out. The first, Officer Miller, was in his mid-50s, with a thick mustache and the weary expression of a man who had seen every form of human stupidity imaginable and was profoundly unimpressed by all of it. The second, Officer Davis, was much younger, probably late 20s, with a sharp, curious look in his eye. He was taking in the house, the neighborhood, the whole bizarre scene. I met them at the front door before they could even knock, holding the storm door open and offering a placid smile. "Good evening, officers. Can I help you?" Officer Miller sighed, the sound carrying the weight of 1,000 ridiculous dispatch calls. "Good evening, sir. We received a call about this address." He consulted his notepad. "A call about well, she said it was a drone strike?" I maintained my calm, serene expression. "A drone delivery, officer. Not a strike. There's a slight but very important difference in nomenclature. One typically involves Hellfire missiles and a designated target. The other involves medical supplies and a customer." This was firmly in the latter category. Officer Davis, the younger cop, chimed in, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "The complainant, a Miss Carol Peterson, claimed you flew an unlicensed aircraft into community airspace to smuggle illicit materials onto your property." I let out a soft chuckle, as if this were the most absurd thing I'd ever heard. "Well, I can see how she might be confused. The illicit materials in question are medical-grade oxygen for my 3-month-old son, who has a chronic respiratory condition. The delivery was being physically obstructed at the front gate by the very same Miss Peterson who called you. As for the unlicensed aircraft, I can assure you it is a fully licensed FAA-compliant commercial logistics drone registered to my company, Ether Logistics. It was operating under emergency medical transport protocols, on a pre-approved flight path exclusively over private property to its registered home base, which is, incidentally, this address." I held up my phone. "I have the flight log, the FAA registration number, the drone's liability insurance certificate, and a scanned copy of my son's prescription right here, if you'd like to see them. Or perhaps you'd like to inspect the illicit materials firsthand." Miller and Davis exchanged a look. This was clearly not the unhinged suburbanite they had been expecting. Miller's expression of weariness was deepening into one of annoyance, directed not at me, but at the woman who had wasted his time. "Sir, would you mind if we came in for a moment?" Miller asked, his tone shifting from accusatory to procedural. "Not at all, officer, please." I led them through the living room to my office. The first thing they saw was Leo's setup, the new, full oxygen tank standing proudly in the corner, the soft green light of the regulator indicating a healthy flow. The oximeter on the monitor, now reading a beautiful, stable 98%. And in the bassinet next to my desk, Leo himself sleeping the peaceful sleep of a baby who had no idea of the suburban warfare being waged in his name. Sarah, hearing the voices, came downstairs. She introduced herself as an ER nurse, and in a calm, professional voice, she explained Leo's condition, the premature birth, the underdeveloped lungs, the absolute necessity of the supplemental oxygen. She didn't editorialize or complain about Carol. She just stated the medical facts. It was a masterclass in credibility. Officer Miller was listening intently, his face softening as he looked at Leo. Officer Davis, however, seemed more interested in my equipment. "That was a Goliath 8 series that made the drop, wasn't it?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but failing to hide his inner tech nerd. The payload capacity on that thing is insane. We saw a demo of one at a first responder tech conference last year. Good eye, officer, I said with a nod. It's a workhorse, rated for 50 pounds in gale force winds. Sweet, he muttered under his breath. Officer Miller finally had enough. He sighed, the sound a mix of resignation and disbelief. He turned to me. So, let me get this absolutely straight. A woman, your HOA president, stopped a van from delivering life-sustaining oxygen to your sick infant son, so you had it airdropped onto your front lawn by a commercial cargo drone? That is the long and short of it, yes, officer, I confirmed. Miller pinched the bridge of his nose, closing his eyes for a long moment. He pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Car 54. You can clear the call at 114 Willow Lane. The situation is resolved. It's a civil matter. He paused, listening to the crackle on the other end. No, there's no threat. It's a neighbor dispute. Another pause. No, I do not need a supervisor. 54 clear. He clipped the radio back to his shoulder and turned to me, a look of profound exhaustion on his face. Sir, he said, for my sake, for the sake of the poor dispatchers, try not to airdrop things onto your lawn on a regular basis. It makes for a lot of very confusing paperwork. I will do my best, officer, I said solemnly. Have a good night, he said, turning to leave. As he walked out, Officer Davis gave me a quick, subtle nod of respect. It was a small gesture, but it felt like winning an Oscar. The law had come knocking, and they had left impressed. In the modern suburb, the town square is not a physical place. It's a digital one. In Creekside Meadows, it was a WhatsApp group called Creekside Comms, and it was the digital battlefield where reputations were made and destroyed. As soon as the police cruisers pulled away, my phone began to vibrate off the table. The digital war had begun. I opened the app. It was a waterfall of frantic messages. Carol Peterson! Urgent community alert! I have just had to call the police on the Reed residence at 114 Willow Lane. They used a military-style drone to bypass our community security and smuggle an unknown package onto their property. This is a grave violation of our collective safety and privacy. I am safe, but shaken. She was good, I had to give her that. Military-style drone. Smuggle. Shaken. It was a masterfully crafted piece of suburban propaganda. Her loyalists immediately jumped in. Brenda, Lot 28. Oh my God, Carol, are you okay? That's terrifying. We need more security. Gary, Lot 12. A drone? Like on the news? Unacceptable. I'm with you, Carol. This has gone too far. Then came the gossip mongers, the ones who just wanted the details. Trish, Lot 35. I saw it. It was huge. Looked like something from a movie. What did they drop? Was it drugs? It was probably drugs. I rolled my eyes. Trish thought everything was drugs. Last month she was convinced the Amazon delivery driver was a cartel mule. But then a new voice emerged. A voice of reason, Bob, from 3 doors down. Lot 118. Wait a minute, Carol. I have a doorbell camera pointed at the street. It looks like you were standing in front of a medical supply van for about 15 minutes before the drone showed up. Is that true? The driver looked like he was trying to reason with you. The tide was beginning to turn. I looked at Sarah, who was reading over my shoulder, her expression hardening. Okay, she said. We can't let her control this. We need to respond. No emotion. Just facts. Like I'm charting on a patient. Together, we crafted our response. It was simple, direct, and devastatingly effective. I posted it in the group. Alex Reed, Lot 114. Good evening, everyone. For anyone concerned by the activity at our home tonight, I want to clear up any confusion. Our 3-month-old son, Leo, was born premature and requires supplemental oxygen to help his lungs develop. His scheduled oxygen tank delivery from Med Supply was physically blocked from entering the community today, and we were facing a medical emergency as his current tank was about to run out. To ensure our son's health and safety, my logistics company arranged an alternate emergency delivery directly to our private property. The delivery was successful, and Leo is safe and sound. We are grateful to the local police department for their quick response and understanding of the situation. We hope this puts everyone's mind at ease. The effect was instantaneous. The digital room fell silent for a moment, and then the tone of the conversation shifted completely. Neighbor Jane, Lot 22. "Oh my goodness, Alex and Sarah, I had no idea. I'm so glad your little one is okay. Don't listen to the noise." Neighbor Mike, Lot 19. "Blocked a medical delivery for a baby? That's not right. Glad you found a way." Then came the kill shot. Bob from 3 doors down, my new favorite person on the planet, uploaded a file to the chat. It was a 30-second video clip from his doorbell camera. The video quality was crystal clear. It showed Carol, arms crossed, standing defiantly in front of the Med Supply van. The audio was even better. Carol, on video. "The bylaws make no distinction for emergency supplies. A failure to plan on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine." The group chat exploded. The narrative was no longer Carol's to control. She had been exposed, her petty tyranny laid bare for all to see. She tried to fight back, posting a series of increasingly unhinged messages about protocol, the sanctity of the bylaws, and how we were all missing the larger point about unauthorized aerial vehicles. But no one was listening anymore. They were too busy watching the video of her telling a man that his baby's breathing difficulties were an inconvenience to her schedule. In the court of public opinion of Creekside Meadows, judgment had been rendered. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had won. The neighborhood group chat was a sea of supportive messages. People who used to just give me a polite nod were now offering waves and smiles when I went to get the mail. The likes on Bob's video post were in the triple digits. The revolution, it seemed, had been successful. But I had underestimated the enemy. A defeated tyrant doesn't just slink away. They retreat, regroup, and look for a new weapon. Carol's new weapon arrived via certified mail, a crisp white envelope taped ominously to my front door. Inside wasn't a handwritten apology. It was a thick, creamy piece of cardstock from the HOA's official legal counsel, a formal cease and desist order, accompanied by an itemized invoice of my crimes. I read it aloud to Sarah in our kitchen, my voice dripping with disbelief. Official notice of violation and fines. First, a fine of $500 for unapproved commercial activity. I assume that's for the heinous crime of receiving a package. Sarah snorted into her coffee. Second, I continued, a fine of $1,000 for operation of an unmanned aerial vehicle in community airspace. They're really sticking with that one. Third, a fine of $250 for unseemly lawn clutter. That must have been for the 30 seconds the container was sitting on the grass before I brought it inside. And the grand finale? A fine of $1,500 for willful endangerment of the community. Total amount due within 15 business days to avoid further legal action. $3,250. Sarah slammed her mug down on the granite countertop. "That's it! This is harassment! We need to call a lawyer! We can sue her for this!" I looked at the letter, at the stuffy, legalistic language designed to intimidate and bully. I looked at the astronomical, completely fabricated fines. And I didn't feel angry. I felt inspired. A slow smile spread across my face. I looked past Sarah, out the kitchen window to our perfectly manicured, HOA-compliant backyard. "This isn't a fine, honey," I said, my voice eerily calm. It's a challenge. She's not backing down. She's doubling down. So are we. Sarah looked at me, confused. What are you talking about? What are we going to do, buy a bigger drone? No, I said, my eyes gleaming with the thrill of a new project. We're not going to break her rules anymore. We're going to use her own rule book against her. She wants to play with rules and protocol? Fine. We're going to build a monument to rules and protocol. A monument so perfect, so compliant, so utterly by the book, that it will drive her insane. Sarah followed my gaze out to the backyard. Alex, what are you talking about? I'm going to build a landing pad. I didn't waste any time. The rest of the day, my expensive work monitors were no longer dedicated to ether logistics. They were dedicated to my new passion project, Operation Malicious Compliance. I had the digital blueprints for Creekside Meadows from when we'd built our deck. I had the full 300-page PDF of the HOA, CC, and Rs. I spent the next several hours in a state of hyper-focused bliss, cross-referencing every bylaw on construction, landscaping, permanent structures, fencing, and even lighting. I was an artist, and the rule book was my muse. On one screen I had CAD software open, where a design was beginning to take shape. It was a 10 by 10 foot square of reinforced concrete, situated in the far corner of our backyard. But it was so much more. The design included embedded, motion-activated LED landing lights. It had its own dedicated underground power line. It was to be surrounded on two sides by a 6-foot-high acoustic dampening fence, and the pièce de résistance, a small, elegant pole on the corner holding a professional-grade weather station, complete with an anemometer to measure wind speed. Every single element was a direct, calculated response to the HOA rulebook. The next day I made a call. A friend in the real estate business had recommended a contractor to me a year ago, describing him as a man who hates HOAs more than he hates termites. His name was Gus. Gus arrived in a dusty Ford F-250 that looked like it had personally survived several wars. He was a burly man in his 60s, with a grizzled beard, a sun-weathered face, and skeptical eyes that had seen it all. He lumbered up my driveway, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You the drone guy?" he grunted by way of greeting. "I'm the drone guy," I confirmed, shaking his calloused hand. "Alex Reed." "Gus," he said, "heard you had a run-in with Carol Peterson. That woman could curdle milk with a dirty look. So what's the job? You want me to build you a patio, fire pit, a nice, tall privacy fence?" He said the last part with a wink. "Better," I said, leading him around to the backyard. "I want you to build me a private FAA-compliant and, most importantly, 100% HOA-proof drone landing pad." Gus stopped dead in his tracks. He stared at me. "A what now?" I spent the next 10 minutes walking him through the entire saga. Leo's condition, the med supply van, the blockade at the gate, Carol's smug recitation of the bylaws, the airdrop, the cops, the fines. Gus listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to grudging respect, and finally to undisguised glee. Then I pulled out my tablet and showed him the plans. "Okay, look at this," I said, tapping the screen. "According to Bylaw 34B, any permanent concrete structure over 100 square feet needs full Architectural Review Committee approval, a process that can take months. But, and this is the beautiful part, any structure under 100 square feet is considered a patio extension and only requires a simple notice as long as it's not visible from the street. So we make it 99.8 square feet and tuck it back here behind the house." Gus nodded slowly, a grin starting to form. "Next, the fence," I continued, swiping to another diagram. Bylaw 51A says fences can't be over 6 feet high. It says nothing about what they're made of. So we'll build a 6-foot fence to code, but we'll use sound-dampening acoustic panels for the materials. It's not a spite fence, it's a noise abatement feature. Noise abatement, Gus repeated, savoring the words. I like it. The lights embedded in the concrete, they aren't runway lights. They're low-voltage, flush-mounted landscape lighting, which is explicitly permitted under the gardening statutes. And this, I pointed to the final flourish, the weather station. This is the best part. Bylaw 22C prohibits any antenna over 10 feet tall for amateur radio, but it has a specific exemption for personal weather monitoring equipment. This isn't an antenna for a drone, it's my own personal weather station. Totally compliant. Gus was silent for a long moment. He looked from the detailed plans on my tablet to my face, then back to the plans. The slow grin spread across his entire face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Son, he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble of pure admiration. In my 35 years of swinging a hammer, I've built some beautiful custom homes. I've also been paid good money to build a lot of spite fences. Tall ones, ugly ones, ones that block a neighbor's prize-winning roses from the sun, but a spite helipad? He slapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that nearly sent me into the bushes. You, my friend, are an artist, a goddamn poet of pettiness. He looked out at the pristine lawn where the monument would stand. When do we start? The first survey flags, small orange markers fluttering in the breeze, appeared in my backyard on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, my email pinged with a new notification. From Creekside Meadows HOA Board. Subject: Mandatory Emergency HOA Meeting. Carol, emboldened by her lawyer's threatening letter and absolutely enraged by the sight of Gus's crew taking soil samples, had called in her ultimate weapon, a public shaming. The agenda was simple and direct. To address the flagrant and dangerous violations by the resident of 114 Willow Lane, and to discuss immediate remedial actions. Attendance was listed as mandatory. The meeting was held that Wednesday evening in the community clubhouse, a sterile, joyless building that smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner and shattered dreams. The room was packed. Every folding chair was taken. Carol had successfully whipped the neighborhood into a frenzy of fear and curiosity. She stood at a podium at the front of the room, looking severe and powerful in a navy blue blazer. Her two loyalists from the HOA board sat beside her like well-trained gargoyles. They had arranged the room like a courtroom, and I was clearly the one on trial. Sarah and I walked in and took seats in the back row. A low murmur rippled through the room as we entered. Sarah squeezed my hand, her knuckles white. I gave her a reassuring squeeze back, my own heart thumping a steady, determined rhythm. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Carol banged a small gavel on the podium. The room fell silent. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, she began, her voice dripping with false gravitas. As you know, our community is built on a foundation of rules and mutual respect. These rules are not suggestions. They are the very fabric that holds our peaceful way of life and our property values together. She paused for dramatic effect, scanning the crowd. Unfortunately, that fabric is being threatened. One of our own residents, Alex Reed of 114 Willow Lane, has decided that the rules do not apply to him. She went on for 10 minutes, delivering a dramatic, over-the-top performance. She used words like reckless endangerment, flagrant disregard, and a clear and present threat. She recounted the drone incident, painting it as a near-catastrophic event that put children and pets at risk. She held up the cease and desist letter. The board has levied fines in the amount of $3,250 for these egregious violations, she declared. Mr. Reed has refused to pay. Instead, her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, He has begun preparations for an unapproved industrial construction project in his backyard. This defiance cannot stand. I am asking the board tonight to authorize our lawyers to place a lien on the Reed property if these fines are not paid within 48 hours, and all construction plans are not immediately abandoned." She finished her speech, her chest puffed out, looking like a conquering hero. She had presented her case. She had made me the villain. And now she was waiting for the crowd to cheer and for me to crumble. She didn't know who she was dealing with. When Carol finished, a tense silence filled the room. All eyes turned to me. I calmly raised my hand. "I'd like to present a rebuttal," I said, my voice clear and even. Carol smirked. "Very well, Mr. Reed. The floor is yours." She clearly expected me to stammer out a few weak excuses before she shut me down. I walked to the front of the room, not with a binder of rules, but with my tablet. I connected it to the clubhouse's projector. The large screen behind the podium, which had been displaying the HOA logo, now mirrored my device. "Good evening, everyone," I began. "Carol has made some very serious accusations tonight. She's painted a picture of me as a reckless rule breaker who endangered the community. I'd like to present a slightly different picture, one based not on hyperbole, but on facts and evidence." Click. The first image appeared on the screen. It was a high-resolution still from Bob's doorbell camera. It showed Carol, arms crossed, defiantly blocking the med supply van. "This is Exhibit A," I said. "The start of the incident. This is not a delivery of a new television or patio furniture. This is a medical supply vehicle, which I can prove with Exhibit B." Click. A scanned document appeared on the screen. It was the official delivery order from Med Supply for 2 tanks of M24 medical-grade oxygen, prescribed for one Leo Reed. Now, Carol claims she was simply enforcing the rules. Let's hear her in her own words. Click! I played the video. The entire room listened in stunned silence as Carol's voice echoed through the speakers. "A failure to plan on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine." A collective gasp went through the crowd. People were looking at Carol, then back at the screen. The narrative was already crumbling. "That statement was made after she was explicitly told the delivery was for a sick infant," I continued, my voice cold as ice. "She was not enforcing a rule in good faith. She was abusing her power. But don't take my word for it. Let's see what the police thought." Click. The official police report appeared, and I used a digital highlighter to point out the key phrases. Complainant was physically obstructing a verified medical delivery. And at the bottom, the conclusion: nature of call, civil dispute. Report status, unfounded. The murmuring in the room grew louder. People were turning to look at Carol, their expressions shifting from concern to anger. Her face was pale, her smug confidence gone, replaced by a deer-in-the-headlights panic. "But I didn't want to stop there," I said, my voice rising with righteous power. "Because Carol's defense is that she is a protector of rules and safety. I was wondering if this was a one-time lapse in judgment or part of a pattern. So, using public record requests available to any HOA member, I pulled the violation records for the last 12 months. Click. A massive spreadsheet filled the screen. It was a list of every single fine and violation notice Carol had issued as president. "Let's review some of these, shall we?" I said, using my tablet to scroll through the list. "A $50 fine for the Hendersons for leaving their Christmas lights up until January 3rd. A $75 fine for the Garcias because their son's bicycle was left on the driveway overnight. A $100 fine for the Chungs for planting unapproved petunias. A formal warning for Brenda in Lot 28 for her mailbox being painted eggshell white instead of the approved tofu white." Brenda, Carol's most vocal supporter, gasped and looked down, embarrassed. "I counted them," I announced. In the last year, Carol has issued 117 violation notices. Over 80% of the households in this room tonight have been fined or formally warned by her for the most trivial, insignificant things imaginable. This isn't about order. It's not about property values. It's about power. It's about one person's need to control every aspect of our lives. I turned to face the crowd, my voice ringing with conviction. Carol claims I endangered this community. The evidence shows the only person who endangered a resident, a 3-month-old baby, was her, and that brings me to my final exhibit. Click. A section of the HOA bylaws appeared on screen. Bylaw 7, Section F, Paragraph 2. I read it aloud. The board presidency can be subject to an immediate recall vote if the president is found by a majority of members to have acted in a manner that willfully endangers the health or safety of a resident, or to have engaged in a pattern of harassment against community members. I let the words hang in the air for a long, silent moment. I believe we have established both of those things tonight. Therefore I, Alex Reed, of 114 Willow Lane, move for an immediate vote of no confidence and to recall Carol Peterson as HOA president, effective immediately. The room erupted. Bob from 3 doors down shot to his feet. I second the motion. All in favor? Another voice yelled. Hands shot up all over the room. It was a forest of them. It wasn't even a contest. It was a landslide, a revolution. Carol stood at the podium, her face ashen, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. She looked at the sea of hands raised against her, and in that moment she was no longer a queen. She was just a powerless, defeated woman in a navy blue blazer. The reign of terror was over. The rest of the meeting was a blur of chaotic, joyful democracy. Carol was officially voted out. Her 2 gargoyles on the board resigned in solidarity, or perhaps embarrassment. A reluctant but sensible Bob, from 3 doors down, was nominated and elected as the interim HOA president. His first official act was to call a motion to void all fines against the Reed residents. It passed unanimously. The atmosphere in Creekside Meadows changed overnight. It was like a spell had been broken. People smiled more. They stopped to chat at their mailboxes. Kids' bikes were occasionally left on driveways, and the world did not, in fact, end. Carol's house went on the market a week later. She was gone within the month, vanishing from the neighborhood as quietly as a ghost, leaving behind only the legend of her downfall. And in my backyard, the monument began to rise. Gus and his crew got to work, and the construction of the landing pad became a neighborhood spectacle. People didn't complain about the noise of the concrete mixer. They brought Gus's crew lemonade. They'd wander over to admire the work, asking me questions about the acoustic fencing and the flush-mounted lighting. It wasn't a spite pad anymore. It was a symbol of their collective victory, a concrete and rebar declaration of independence. The story jumps forward 6 months. It's a warm summer day. The sky is a brilliant, cloudless blue. In my backyard, the landing pad is complete. It's a sleek, professional, and slightly absurdly over-engineered square of gray in a sea of green grass, and it's the center of our new life. Leo, now a chubby, giggling 9-month-old, is thriving. His lungs are strong, the oxygen tanks long gone, replaced by the happy shrieks of a healthy baby. He's sitting in a small playpen in the middle of the pad, happily banging 2 blocks together. Sarah is sunbathing on a lounge chair she's set up on the far corner, a paperback novel resting on her stomach. The acoustic fence provides a lovely, quiet pocket in the backyard. I'm standing at my brand-new top-of-the-line grill, which is parked on the corner of the pad where the weather station stands, its little propeller spinning lazily in the breeze. The smell of grilling burgers fills the air. Our new neighbor, a young guy who had just moved into Carol's old house, pokes his head over the fence. "Hey, smells great over there," he calls out. He looks down at the impressive concrete structure. That's some patio you've got. Is that a helicopter pad or something? I flip a burger, a wide, satisfied grin spreading across my face. I look at my son, safe and healthy. I look at my wife, relaxed and happy. I look at this monument to what happens when you push a nerd too far. Something like that, I call back, my voice full of humor and warmth. Let's just say it's for very, very important deliveries. The war was over. We had won, and the victory tasted like a perfectly grilled cheeseburger, enjoyed in the sunshine, on my own private, hard-won piece of ground.